University of the West Indies, the Department of Literatures and English Cape Lecture Series for 2021. This is the first time that the department will be offering the Literatures and English Cape Lecture Series online. One of the advantages of that is that you will be able to access the lectures at your own convenience after they have been posted. But one of the disadvantages is that you will not have that direct and immediate interaction with the presenter that you would have in a face-to-face situation. So I encourage you to post your questions in the chat. The presenter will be able to see these questions and will respond to them at the end of the presentation. Another disadvantage of the online mode of delivery is that sometimes it can be pretty easy to be distracted in the online classroom. I suggest that you use note-taking as a way of remaining focused. Have your notebook next to you and write notes from the lecture. I expect that many of you intend to continue your studies at university after you've completed your CAPE exam. And I hope that most of you have already applied to the University of the West Indies. Be sure to go on to the Literatures in English website to look at the programs we offer to see if any of them are a fit for you. In addition to our long-standing BA Literatures in English, we also offer a BA in Liberal Studies, a BA in Film Studies, and most recently, a BA in Writing, Literature, and Publishing. If you have any questions or queries, you can contact us using the contact information given on the website. You can easily access the website through the UWI Mona homepage, click on faculties, and then click on the name of the department. We'd be happy to hear from you. I hope you enjoy our CAPE lecture series, and I hope that you find it instructive and useful as you prepare for your CAPE Literatures in English exams. Good luck in your exams, and I hope to see you at UWI Mona, and especially in the Department of Literatures in English. Thank you.
Go.
Welcome to the CAPE Literature Online Lecture Series hosted by the Department of Literatures in English. It is our absolute pleasure to have with us today the Lorna Goodison. So I am going to start by reading her bio. Lorna Goodison has published numerous poetry collections, including collected poems, Supplying Salt and Light, Golden Grove, New and Selected Poems, Controlling the Silver, Traveling Mercies, Heart Ease, and Tamarind Season. She is also the author of the short story collections, By Love Possessed, Fool Fool Roses Leaving Labor in Vain Savannah, and Baby Mother and the King of Swords, as well as the memoir From Harvey River, a memoir of my mother and her people, which won the British Columbia National Award for Canadian Nonfiction and was a finalist for both the Trillium Book Award and the Charles Taylor Prize for Literary Nonfiction. In 2019, she published Redemption Ground, Essays and Adventures. Lorna Goodison served as Poet Laureate of Jamaica from 2017 to 2020. She has received a Wyndham Campbell Literature Prize, the Queen's Gold Medal for Poetry, the OCM Bocas Prize for Caribbean Literature in the Poetry category, and she has also been awarded a Musgrave Gold Medal and Jamaica's Order of Distinction. What a pleasure to have you with us today, Lorna Goodison. All right, so we will just maybe jump right in. And you know that I have taught selected poems on many occasions, and you just know I'm a huge fan of your work. I don't think I would be a writer today if I had not encountered your work when I vividly recall when you visited UWI when I was an undergraduate there. In selected poems, you explore several themes, but one of the themes perhaps that you privilege and that runs throughout the work is this theme of resilience. I'm thinking of poems like The Road of the Dread, Nanny, Garden of the Women Once Fallen. The poem We Are the Women actually ends with the lines, we are rooting at the burying spot. We are uncovering our hope. This idea that there will be hard times, but we are a resilient people, and that gives us hope. So maybe we could start off by just having you talk to us a bit about the theme of resilience in these poems.
Okay, well, thank you so much, first of all, for having me. And good morning to the Cape students who might be listening. All good wishes to you in all your exam efforts and much love. Okay, resilience. I think a lot about Jamaica all the time. No matter where I am, I spend a lot of time thinking about Jamaica. And one of the things that occurred to me is that many of us don't have a lot. I was thinking about what we get in terms of inheritance. Because of our history, the majority of our people have never come into any real material inheritance. There's, we could say it is owed us and we're fighting for it, through reparations and things like that. But one of the things that I receive and I claim as my inheritance is the enormous resilience that our people, that helped our people to endure the Middle Passage, to endure plantation slavery, post-slavery, which was sometimes just as bad as slavery, and yet to be able to have us, we're here because of these people. Mm-hmm. Entire civilizations have been wiped out, and you would say they endure less than what our people endured. So it must be that there's an enormous reservoir of strength and resilience that they have left for us, and we should humbly claim it. It's not the kind of thing that you should just grab up and say, well, it's, be boastful and arrogant about it. But that sort of way in which we can say, this is what my people left for me. When I look at my own family, my mother had 9 children, and you have to have resilience to be able to do something like that. Just a little anecdote. One of my mother's sisters immigrated to Canada in 1930. You hear me? 1930. I've had family in Canada since 91 years. She went by herself. She journeyed out because she wanted more for herself and her people. So it's that kind of resilience. That's one of the many gifts, one of the, the things that have been left for us, for our people. And I hope I'm drawing upon it in my work.
Oh, of course. And your poems do such an excellent job of honoring these women and that tradition of, being resilient and this strong female lineage as well. And I love that you mentioned your family going to Canada, because the next question I wanted to ask you about was the use of the journey motif. Yeah. That in your poems, a lot of the personae are traveling, they're journeying. And, we talk about this journey through life, this journey of life. On that journey, they have to have faith. Things are going to get rough, the road of the dread, but in the end, we'll be okay. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about perhaps what influenced you to use the journey motif. Is it, a lot of these people are on both physical as well as spiritual journeys. And we can't help but think of the biblical allusion and the Christian idea of journeying, through the wilderness. But is that where it's coming from with you, this journeying?
I suspect anybody who went to school at a particular time, as at my age, you would have, there's certain things that are hardwired into you. And certainly the Exodus story. Everybody who was raised in a Christian home, or a home where the Bible was taught, or you went, my mother faithfully sent us to Sunday school. So you would learn from very early about the Exodus journey, about the Israelites wandering through the wilderness on their way to the promised land. So that is hardwired into us. But also because when I went to school, you learned about things like the Pilgrim's Progress, John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. So you have that there. And then alongside that, you have Rastafari. Or growing up in Jamaica, particularly when I was growing up, and Rasta was just sort of coming into their own. Rastafarians were coming to their own, or Rastafari was coming into its own. They had they put in the front of our minds that we were a people stolen from somewhere, brought from Africa to here, and they wanted to go back. So
Right.
always that idea of, I came here on a journey that I did not want to come on, and I want to go back to where I came from. So that is another, journey motif that is very much in the minds of anybody growing up when I was growing up. Also, then there's the business of the internal journey, because, if you're going to go with biblical motifs again, you have a sense that you have to pass from your old life of sin to new life. That's journey, whether you buy into that or not. But always, and then again, there are the actual real life examples of my people going on journey. My mother came from a little village in Harvey River, which in Hanover, about which I've written extensively. But she said growing up as a child, her father used to travel to Cuba all the time. And here her grandfather went back to England a couple of times. So they grew up knowing that you could go somewhere and come back. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think those are the examples from which I may have been drawing. But I suspect when you're a poet, you only know in hindsight sometimes what it is that influences you, or where you got a particular, inspiration from, where the inspiration for a particular poem came from. And I think a poem like the Road of the Dread was just my own synthesis of maybe things that were happening in my own life at the time. And I realized that I was embarking on a journey, an internal journey, with my own life and my own work. I had to make certain decisions, which meant I had to leave a certain kind of way of life behind to strike out and become an artist. That wasn't an easy thing to do in Jamaica when I was doing it, the work.
Right.
So I think the Road of the Dread is as much influenced by those things I mentioned, those examples I mentioned, as the fact that sometimes your own internal conditions prepare you and send you off on a journey.
I love that. And we see that in my last poem and my last poem again, that the journey applies to you as a writer and this creative journey you're on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But
and
it
you,
also...
and you too, all creative people. You don't grow by standing still or staying still. You have to keep evolving.
So true. So true. And I love that you've touched on as well the idea of exile and the biblical exile, but also migration and diaspora. We can all relate to that as Jamaicans. We all know somebody who has migrated.
Every single person in Jamaica. There's not one human being in Jamaica. Somebody who has been somewhere else, Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I love that, running through the work and how we journey and what sustains us on this journey. And even as you talked about Rastafari and what Velma Pollard calls dread talk, and we see that in the work as well. And I had another question planned, but now that you bring that up, we do see the influence of Rastafari in your work in terms of language and music. How do you pull on that as a resource, and talk to us a little bit maybe about that?
I have enormous admiration for Rastafari, except I couldn't be a Rastafarian woman because I think they need to do a lot of work in that regard, and I'm way too wayward.
In terms of the gender politics?
No, I'm not walking down any man or anybody.
I thought you were going to talk about the food and the lifestyle in terms of the food.
We know all about that, so we're not, and I don't want to anger anybody, so I'll just leave it. But I'm not a Rastafarian woman. Okay, but seriously, I think the New World people, we owe a great debt to Rastafari, because when I see young people in particular, or everybody, Toni Morrison walking through the world with dreads, we have to credit those people who went ahead of us and suffered greatly. The police used to beat them and cut off their locks, and it was as if you had died if you became a Rastafarian. When I was growing up, I would hear mothers speaking about usually their sons as if they had died because they had entered into this thing which they couldn't understand, and then the association with ganja and all of that. But these were people who we have to thank, and we have to give them the respect due, because without their vision, I do not know what would be happening. We would still be buying into that terrible colonial and post-colonial narrative that we were less than and are less than, and there's something wrong with your hair, and your nose too broad, and all of these terrible things that they used to tell us about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And Rastafari decided to do the most radical thing of all. They said, don't make any peace with them. Don't buy into it halfway. Just tell them this is have nothing to do with it. Because otherwise, because I think before that, the inclination was a kind of, if I behaved a certain way and I straighten my hair and I behave nicely, there's nothing wrong with straightening my hair, but
buying into neo-colonial practices,
I will be accepted. And we
right.
know it's not true.
Yeah.
They saved us from going down that dead-end road.
So true. And we have to credit them for the music and the influence in the music.
The art, everything in the arts. They put their that is why Jamaican art and Jamaican music and everything is just what it is in the world. It's because they showed us a way where we could be authentically ourselves. And by doing so, we have influenced so many people in the world.
I love that. And introduced as well, which you draw upon in your work, this language of us as royalty, as kings and queens and empresses.
Yeah, and just the business of, the subversion of the English language, which I knew. I think anybody who is trying to break free from any kind of oppressive system, the language is very important. That's what we all know. We don't. That's a whole other program. And Velma is a queen of this. But you had to know that you couldn't just accept what they were giving you. You couldn't just, my favorite still is overstand. You can be understanding me if you're standing over me, just things like that. At the wordplay, just the way you took control of the language. And you just sort of said, no, that's what you say about me, but this is what I say about me, And it's marvelous. It's brilliant. One of my brothers said he heard a man talking about a free nano because he said you shouldn't ban a banana.
I was wondering where that was. I love that.
You shouldn't ban anything. So it's not a banana, it's a free nano.
It's a free nano.
Yeah.
But it's that, as you say, it's that subversive quality, because sometimes we think, how can we fight resistance with the language of the oppressors?
And so, gave us that. They gave us that tool, and we should be grateful to them. And I personally am very grateful to them.
As well as the language of pure and clean heart.
I have a new collection coming out, and I have a whole suite in there about Rastafari. And a part of what I'm saying is that a lot of the modern aesthetic, the way people dress, the green movement, plant-based food, a lot of it, Rastafari, they were doing this long before anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Returning to the land, being able to sustain yourself.
Food is what they are now calling plant-based. Yeah. Anyway, we're taking up this whole program with Rastafari. Respect due.
Respect due, of course. And I love that. And it's relevant to your work. So I wanted to talk as well then about this whole idea of sustaining oneself on a journey. And yes, Rastafari, you tap into that as an influence to help with sustaining on the journey. But the other thing you tap into is the use of rituals.
Yes.
Baptism, communion, mercy rain, people in the river. And a lot of these rituals are also communal, women gathering, women supporting each other. And I love rituals as well, in terms of the process and the ritual of writing, but also that spiritual connection to rituals. So I wanted for you to talk to us a little bit about just rituals in terms of your process of writing and how maybe you see them represented in the work itself.
Yes, well, I love your poems that deal with rituals. That 9-night suite, I think is just wonderful. I really.
Don't let me cry on the show, Thank you, Miss Lorna. Thank you.
Okay, here's the thing. I was thinking about this recently that, in all the societies, people relied more on rituals because they didn't have, they didn't have television on the news telling them what was happening and so on. So you were surrounded by a world in which you had to try and exercise some control over it. And very often this would come in the form of rituals, like Native Americans. I live out in British Columbia where, they're the Seashell band, the Native Canadian band here, this particular band, you have to realize that those people have lived there for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I'm sure before they go out fishing, I watch people going out fishing. I know they have rituals you know, to pray for a good, you know,
protection, a good catch. Yes.
All of those things. And those things come naturally to you. And I think our people still, some maybe at some level will still do that. But I think I've often thought that it would be lovely if we could, out of our own culture, restore or make up some rituals to help, for example, adolescent boys. Why it should be like in communities where when a boy gets to be like 12, that man age, you know, you read about it in Joseph Campbell and all those great people who talk about maybe the community should get all of them together and the men should address them and say, you have become men and this is the responsibility of a man. Because nobody, you know, some of them don't have fathers. But what would be wrong with doing something like that?
I'm thinking here of the circle, you know, to give them that sacred space of the circle.
Right. No, this is how men behave because they don't know. And from Harvey River, you know, I just tried. My work is very much drawn from my life in the world. I read a lot and I think a lot, but a lot of it is just from my actual experience. And I really did hear a woman told me once, we're talking about what happened when girls became women, when they had their, you know, they had a period, the first period. And this lady said her grandfather called her and presented her to her family and said, she's now a woman, respect her, she could be a mother. And everybody, they all hugged her and he gave her some money. And I never forgot that. And I thought there's something about that old man that obviously remembers, there's a memory, some ancestral memory, that is how you treat people when they, that is how you, because you have to be looking after your young people. You have to be, you know, so I'm saying, I'm hoping, I'm just throwing this out, that what is wrong with something, would be wrong with doing something like that in communities.
I love that. I'm reminding them of core guiding principles of respect for self and for others.
And we're seeing them, you know, we're looking at you, we're with you, we're here to nurture you and lift you up, you know. I don't know.
And it takes us back to the village, the power of the village. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I try to write about, you know what I do? I try to slip in these things into my stories and my poems in the hope that maybe people, because I'm approaching the end of my writing life, you know, I'm under no illusion. Most of my life is behind me. And I don't know how much I have before me, but I know that I've written most of what I've had to write. That's just a fact. So I'm hoping that I've put these things in there and I'm hoping that they would be somehow, maybe people can take them up. I'm very happy when people tell me that they use my poems as rituals. People read my poems at funerals and weddings and things like that. And that's what I wrote them for. Anyway, that's it.
No, that was lovely. And I can't imagine a world without your poems and, you know, the production of more poems. So please continue to write. But what you just said reminds me of the poem you have. I think it's The Judge Speaks to My Son. I don't think I'm remembering the title.
Speaks to the man, yeah.
Right. You know, and this idea of, you know, who is protecting or who is looking out for our young people and protecting them.
Yeah, well, you know, Tanya, that is why just a little, you know, I made sure when I was poet laureate, honestly, I prayed before I took up that thing, that post, that job. But I felt I got an that said, please make way for the young people, do whatever you can to open up, you know, opportunities for the young people. And someone who won the prize winners in the poet, you know, the poet laureates competition were some of your students. And some of them came from all over Jamaica. That's what made me so happy. One of them came from near my mother's village in Hanover, just a guy in Hanover writing, you know. So we have to just open up these ways for them, I think.
Yes, and you know, I'm so grateful for the opportunities you gave them. I tell them they're my students in whom I am well pleased. Those opportunities and the courses that you did as well, combining self-defense in, you know, with poetry and reminding us that poetry serves a practical purpose in this world.
It does, because if you have it's self-expression, and the self-defense is a form of self-expression. Did you see that brilliant thing about a little girl who fought off a man at a bus stop in Florida?
No.
But it just, yeah. And I thought maybe she's one of my girls.
And I hope she recited some poetry while she was fighting about, you know.
No, but I mean, I'm not saying that they should go out and beat down people, but what poetry does, what it did for me was it gave me a place to stand in the world, in that I always was a very dreamy, very preoccupied child. I got into a lot of trouble for daydreaming. There was a whole world going on inside me, and poetry gave me a way to put a shape to it. I don't know what would have happened if I had not discovered, or poetry had not discovered me, or I had discovered poetry, but I don't know, but it gives you something to do with it, with your life.
Right. And just, you know, as an aside, I tell my students who are beginning their writing journey that you don't write for fame. You don't write for, you write because you have to, because this is part of your survival mechanism in the world.
Absolutely. And if they're writing for money, good luck to them, because until, you know, poetry, yeah, you usually get paid with 2 copies of the book.
And hopefully they don't get stuck in the mail.
Yeah.
But no, I love that. Just reminding us of the power of not just rituals, but also the village. And we see that aspect of, you know, the community in your work, of communal values and of women and people gathering, and how that is part of, you started off with inheritance. That is part of our inheritance.
It definitely is. And we should not allow modern life to take it from us. It's, you know, how people get upset when there's a will and you get left out of it. Don't let them leave you out of that will. Because
Right.
you know, I draw on my mother's wisdom and my ancestors' wisdom every day of life. There's something that occurs and I would think, what would my mother say or she would do? You know, or my aunt or somebody. They help me all the time. And don't throw that aside. It's valuable help.
Yeah, that ancestral wisdom that we see in the work, in the poems. And coming to that, the idea of that ancestral wisdom also takes me to my next question, in terms of how your poems are grounded in orality. And sometimes we forget that orality is a poetic strategy. Yes. That way in which the poems are on a page and privileging the scribal tradition, but you find a way on the page to elevate the oral tradition through incantations, dialogue, chants, and just reminding us of, yes, when we think of orality, we think of the British tradition of poems such as ballads, but we also think of African retention, you know, or cultural or folk tales, or, you know, the wisdom that has been passed by word of mouth from our ancestors. And so I wanted to ask a little bit about how consciously you bring that oral tradition into your work, and why, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, the simple answer is I write what I hear in my head, and I write in many ways in the way I speak. And I speak, I love language, so I will draw upon whatever word is most fitting. You know, and it could be a very old word, or it could be a word in Jamaican dialect, or, you know, I will slip in an occasional word of French because I did some French in school, and actually, you know, anyway, but things like I said, I'm writing what is going on in my head, but mostly, I think I want to address this business about orality, in that we need to remember that there are some venues where orality, you know, is more important than the written word. In a courthouse, you can get a man killed because of what you say. To give evidence in a court, they don't ask you to write down your evidence. They say they call you up, you take an oath, and you give your testimony. We just saw in that case, the Derek Chauvin case in the United States, so people's verbal accounts were able to bring justice in this awful situation. So we have to remember that, you know, it's not like, you know, they're telling us, oh, you know, people who can read or write speak, and people, you know, when you get married, you sign a paper, but you also vow to love, honor, and obey. I don't know about the obey, but
hopefully they've taken out the obey parts.
You still, the written word, still the spoken word carries. To quote Rastafari, they say word sounds have power. So I have enormous love and respect and regard for the sanctity of the spoken word. I know that your words can heal or words can harm. Words have real, so when I'm writing, that is also, I think, in the back of my mind. There's some things that, I will not, when you put it down and you think, well, maybe I shouldn't put that down. Because I think the words will live somehow, on the page. I just want to give you one little example that I used to tell my students at the University of Michigan. Nelson Mandela, for many years, while he spent 27 years in prison, would say again and again, South Africa will be free. And then he'd pause and then he'd say, in my lifetime. And nobody I know heard him, believed him. I used to say, I know, I love you, Mr. Mandela, but really, look at what he was up against. Look at what South Africa was up against. And I have a lot of connections with South African poets. But he believed these words, and he actually, I believe he spoke them into reality. Because in fact, South Africa did become free in his lifetime. But he was saying that years before that. And I'm saying he believed every word he was saying. So I think about that sometimes when I write, not while I'm doing it, but after. And I think that your words, if you're a poet, they have to mean something. And there are examples where they in fact can mean something. Like Mr. Mandela speaking, South Africa will be free. He always paused though, in my lifetime.
Because part of that manifestation is saying it's allowed.
That's why word sounds have power. Yeah.
Right. And I love that even you speak about South Africa, and I think of your poem Bedspread. And as the women are, knitting the bedspread and weaving it, they're weaving their words of wisdom into it.
Yes, absolutely. I think that it goes back to your business of rituals too. I think there are all sorts of examples. There's a tome called the Carmina Gadelica, which if you ever come across it, you might be interested in it. It's a sort of collection of Gaelic sort of folk sayings and prayers and chants and things like that. And it was collected by, I think he was a minister who went about all over the hills of Scotland and Ireland and places and collected these sayings, folk sayings and prayers. And some of them are just very beautiful, but some of them are just, runes and chants where, if you are planting something, you say a particular prayer. If you have an injury for a sprained wrist, things. And I'm sure that old-time Jamaicans had things like that they did.
Oh, of course.
Some of them are, maybe I'm hoping that maybe there are people who are collecting these things.
Right. And even if you go in a room and you think there's a duppy there, you have to say something to the duppy. You have to
come out of my room, duppy.
you have to say something. But yes, I love that. And when we use words, on the page, even when we think of songs and how so many of the titles of your work, of the poems, have the word song in there. Yes. Song in terms of oral, but also song as having the capacity to sustain and heal. And part of what we've inherited, these songs, work songs,
absolutely.
Songs of redemption. And I'll probably I was planning to go to it, but maybe now would be a great time. I know you grew up in a house with musicians, and talk to us a little bit about music, how that functions in your life and feeds into your work. I'm thinking here even of the poem for Don Drummond.
Yes. Well, I really, with each passing day, I am more and more grateful for my life. I really am. I thank God every single day that He gave me gave me life, and that I was born into the particular family into which I was born, because they're quite an extraordinary lot of people, and like every family, you have all kinds of complications. But they were all such creative people. All my siblings are. We've lost one. There are just 8 of us now. But one of my brothers, Howard, my eldest, was a kind of Zen master. He's a very quiet, very, very religious, very settled person. And but he very early became friends with a lot of the foundation members of modern Jamaican music. So honestly, at our house, we'd sit Roland Alfonso. He was very good friends with Roland Alfonso and Tommy McCook from the Scatterlights. people like that. My brother Kingsley was good friends with Jackie Mitu, who is that great organist. People like that would be just passing through my house, and you could say they're there. And so we were involved, my family, particularly my brother Keith, very early started collecting Jamaican music, buying records. And my brother Carl is a social worker. He works in Boys Town, has worked there for well over half a century, just looking after and at-risk youths. So all of these influences, the social work, the music, the things that informed our cultural life in Jamaica were just very present to me growing up. And the music was just also something that I think later, if I were to dissect, if my poetry were something you could sort of physically look at and dissect it, I think the foundation, the foundation layer would have to be hymns, the hymns I heard as a child and sang in school. And then it would be the popular music I listened to at home. My brother Bonnie played a lot of rhythm and blues, a lot of blues, a lot of female singers like Sarah Vaughan, Dakota Staten is a singer he loved. All of that kind of the rhythm and blues, all of that. And then the Jamaican music. And all of that fed into my poetic voice. So I am very hard, my poetry is hardwired to music. I hear music when I write, I think. There's a kind of musicality that just accompanies my words, or it doesn't work for me. So that is what I'd say. I don't know if that's too complicated or too unreasonable an explanation.
No, that's perfect. And it reminds our students that, when we're talking about poetry and engaging with it, we have to think of the enjoyment that it gives us as well. While we're deconstructing these themes, we have to remember the rhythm, the alliteration, the rhyme.
Absolutely. It is, what you need to tell the students, and maybe the examiners too, is that is so... Poetry is a gift that is given to us to make our lives easier. It's not a plot to make you look stupid, really. And I think sometimes we teach poetry in a way that makes children feel that they're not smart because they can't figure it out. Some poems are meant to be received in the way you receive music. If you're teaching T.S. Eliot, for example, you can't. There's some parts of the wasteland that you have to just listen to it, and you receive it like you just listen to some music.
And understand that there is meaning and power in just the sound sometimes.
Absolutely. And like I say, and the rhythm, and you don't always have to have a linear narrative. You don't always have to be able to write a story from beginning to end. One of the questions you had sent to me was about that poem about the lady in the judge's poem. And I wanted to say something about that poem very briefly. In that, I'm sorry, the children have to study.
No, this is.
I would like to make life easier for everybody. But the thing about that poem is that you should go right to the end of it, the last couple of lines, because it says something to the effect of I'm biding my time, something holding behind my teeth as only a woman can. I have a poem for you, Judge Man.
Judge Man.
Yeah. And the poem really begins there because the poem itself is the poet's words to a judge. She couldn't have said those words to him in the court. So she's defending. It is like, how it is sometimes you get into an argument with somebody but you can't answer them right there, so you go away.
Right.
And then you say, this is what I should have said to them. That is how, if I were teaching that poem, that's how I'd say to them, look, this is what the poet is saying after the fact, because she couldn't say it in the court because they would lock her up.
And poetry allows us to do that. Poetry allows us to go home and reflect and create alternate, narratives.
That's right, absolutely. So, and I think that would be a good way to enter into that poem, saying, this is because just factually, at the time when that poem occurred, there was still something on the statute books of Jamaica called the Married Woman's Property Law. I think something like a Property Act. But it meant that married women didn't own anything. Everything I had belonged to your husband. And you yourself sort of didn't exist. You existed through your husband. So, you know, when the voice in the poem is being told by the judge, you know, I don't recognize you saying you are able to look after yourself. And so, and it's a poem about women's liberation. It's a woman saying, you know, you don't know my history. You don't know the women I have, the line of women I descend from, or the women, brave women I've known. And yeah.
And being able to fight injustice and giving, and your poems do that in such a brilliant way, to give people who have been disenfranchised, women, and, you know, just other categories, give them voice and give them, empower them to speak.
Absolutely. That is one of the roles of any good poet. You have to give voice to people who have no voice, or whose voices have been taken from them, or who are voices that are not normally heard in literature, in English literature. That's what is great about Caribbean. One of the many wonderful things about Caribbean literature, in that there are voices that are not normally found in literature. You know, ordinary, very ordinary.
I love that. I'm wondering if you are stuck. Oh, you're back with us. Perfect. But that's a perfect segue into what I wanted to ask you about next, because we see so many examples of women's work, or what we stereotypically refer to as women's work, in your poems. Women sewing, laundering, sweeping, and you elevate these images of domesticity. You give value and validate. And I think that's so, you know, important, because so often we ignore the kind of economic contribution that women's work, you know, makes to the social welfare. So talk to us a little bit about why it was important for you to include all of these women sweeping, sewing, cooking, and also using the herbs and what they found in the land to heal.
Well, for one thing, you know, if you read a poet like William Wordsworth, we got a lot of Wordsworth growing up as children in Jamaican schools. But the poems about that by Wordsworth, which we were not taught, are poems that exalt and sing praises to the most ordinary people. He has poems about people who are mentally ill. He has poems about people who are, you know, beggars. He has a poem about a lady who was sent away from France, or deported from France. He has poems about a man whose job is to gather leeches. That's what, like those big worms that they used to use to bleed people in medicine. That was his job. He gathered leeches and sold them to doctors. People doing the most humble, you know, what some people would call scut work. And Wordsworth's poetry is filled with poems like that. So, and I think if we were taught poems like that, we would really like Wordsworth, but we weren't taught those poems.
We had the daffodil ones.
Yeah, the daffodil ones. And even the daffodil was a humble flower in its day, you know. So I think I think that's very much part of romantic, you know, the romantic poets did a lot about to exalt the humble, the everyday. I love the word numinous, that sort of spiritual shining quality you find in the everyday. So I think I'm coming from a kind of noble tradition when I write about ordinary washerwomen and people who, I like washing and ironing as, you know, tropes in my poetry. I love the idea that you can, you know, wash something clean, or that you can be washed yourself, or you can use water. Well, water is such an important, you know, it is Jamaica, you know, the fact that we call Jamaica the land of wood and water is something that I've always found so fascinating. And when we have drought in Jamaica, I always think maybe one day they're going to have to rethink this land of wood and water business. And how important water is in the whole world right now. People are saying the next big wars in the world are going to be caused by water, with access to water.
And stories of contaminated water and Yeah, and I love that because I want to encourage students to watch the interview you just gave for Poetry Unbound. It's available on YouTube. If you just Google Poetry Unbound and Lorna Goodison, I thoroughly enjoyed that interview. And you spoke about the sea and what the sea means to you. And water is all over, you know, the selected poems, the river, and you grew up close to Hope River. And talk to us, you know, a little bit, as you say, about water and how is that significant? I know you mentioned the idea of restoration and cleansing, but maybe just in general, your relationship to water.
Well, if I could, I'm not very good with anything to do with computers, or I cannot sit before it and speak to you. But if I could, if I had a phone or so, I right outside where I'm sitting now. I'm near right by the sea, and I just find it a real gift to be able to be by a body of water. I was born in Kingston, not near the water. And the funny thing about Kingston is, although the harbor is quite near, I think most people it's not in your mind a lot unless you really go down there.
Right.
You know, but early in the morning, you could smell the breeze coming. People talk about the Dr. breeze coming up from the sea. But once I started going to Hanover and being, you know, near the water, near the river, and I just became very, very happy with the idea of being near water. And I think there's a, you know, okay, let me say this to the students, that when you, very often poems, there's some great contradiction, some sort of opposition at the heart of a poem, you know? So if, like me, I grew up in Kingston and was born in an urban setting, and then you go to the country and then you see all this pastoral setting, it provides us a lovely sort of clash that it makes a good poetry, you know? I think maybe my poetry was born then, once I came from that urban setting into a rural setting. And I just thought, this is so good, this is great, this lovely opposition. Sort of, they clashed and started to produce these poems. So I don't know what else I can say about water, except that I just think that we should try to take care of our water sources more in Jamaica. I love
those stories come out of the water. I know sometimes if I'm by a body of water, it's almost like I feel stories coming up out of the water to me. Do you get that feeling like the stories are sometimes coming up in the waves for you?
I think that's a lovely way to say it. Probably. I used to spend lots of time like in Portland. It was that part of my life when I spent a lot of time in Portland. And I just spent the entire day in the water, and you would feel like, you would leave something behind there and you'd get something once you emerge from it. Yeah, you're right. I think stories do come out of the water. I'm going to say that. We have those river mama stories that come from.
And I love your poem, Farewell or Trilogy. I think No Love, there have been no new poems, not since the monsoon of 6 months or so. I think I'm plagiarizing, but the connection between water and creativity. I remember taking a creative writing course once, and they said, if you have writer's block, turn on the tap and sit there and watch the water for a while. It didn't really work for me because I'm looking at the water and I'm thinking, this is not the sea. But
you know what works for me? I don't know about writer's block, but poems where get on a bus, get on something that's moving. A lot of my poems, but you're talking about traveling, just get on a bus or take a drive or a walk. Anything that gets you moving sometimes can really, sort of jiggle things loose, because you begin to free associate with what you see as you go. And sometimes that helps.
I love that. And I always tell my students, you can't have writer's block in Jamaica. All you need to do is just step outside and hear a conversation. And as you say, when you're on the bus, the characters, the things you see.
A bus. I always, when I come I usually somehow find a way to be on a bus. I will go and take, even a short bus ride, I will take the bus.
I'm thinking of our student here who you mentored in your capacity as poet laureate, Delroy McGregor.
Yes.
And I'm thinking Delroy has a lovely poem he shared with me when he's on the bus and he's, the persona is taking somebody to his birthplace, and he's trying to see the place. He's trying to see how she's seeing the place. He's trying to, I guess, imagine her perspective of the place while traveling on the bus.
Lovely, just lovely. Yeah.
This has been wonderful. I guess I could sit with you all day, but
I just want to show you something.
uh-huh.
Okay, I have another chance in Jamaica to show. Nobody in Jamaica has seen this, but this is the gold medal I got from the Queen.
Ooh.
Uh,
Wait, lift it up a little. Let's see.
That's it.
Oh, pretty, pretty.
Okay, there it is.
Oh,
I don't know if you can, but it has
of course.
the news of poetry. I don't know how well you can see that, but poetry is a naked lady here holding a flame in her palm, and I think it's really lovely. Eh?
And poetry does kind of strip us bare.
Yes, so that's a gold medal. Yeah.
I love that, and thanks for sharing that with our students.
Thanks. Yeah.
I love that. And I love the red, and we're channeling the red today.
Yeah, we're just well read. Actually, that means something else in Jamaica. No, that's not what I meant. We're happy and cheerful. And we have read a lot of books, so we're well read.
Yes, we won't go down to all the other meanings of red.
No.
And I guess probably we could close. I'm going to ask you to, if you don't mind, close off by reading a poem for us. But before then, you mentioned this tension in your work and you know, the tension in terms of life, good and evil, urban, bucolic, you know, all these tensions. But I wondered if you could talk to us a little bit about the tension between darkness and light. You know, we have Sister Mary and the Devil, but we have all of these poems with I Shall Light a Candle and the Chant of Light, and just light as such a powerful symbol in your work.
Well, you know, I trained as a painter. You know, I spent quite a few years of my life studying privately, and at the Jamaica School of Art, and then I studied at the School of the Art Students League in New York City. And I was thinking about that recently a lot. I had a great privilege of studying with Jacob Lawrence, who was that famous African-American painter. And I realized then, in hindsight, just how much just being in his company and being able to be around somebody like that helped me with, as it turns out, my writing. Because Mr. Lawrence and a lot of people, a lot of other artists about that time were just so concerned with the advancement of their people. That is what their work was about and for. And our own, it gave me courage, and it gave me help in thinking about what it is my work is for. Why am I doing it? And part of it is that our history, our culture, there's been so much darkness. If you just think about being in the hold of a slave ship, that is enough darkness for any one human being for eternity. And how do you manage to just throw some light into a situation like that? And I think that's, simply put, that is what I think I'm trying to do. Always in the back of my mind is I think about being taken into a place like that and having to survive it. And I think that's what I'm trying to do. I don't know if that is a good enough explanation, but yeah.
No, that is wonderful. And I love the way that the poems apply to history and what we have suffered, but what we are still in many ways enduring. Absolutely. You know, in different manifestations. You know, we could call it neocolonialism.
After effects, so much. I have all kinds of theories about that. How there's a sort of one model, that plantation model, that it persists and it will not go away. We have to keep fighting it, you know.
Sometimes I wish we could do just a general cleansing ritual for the land, for generational trauma.
All those things.
And your work helps us with that.
Well, I'm trying, but you know, every one of us, especially, you know, creative people, that should be a part of what we do. If it's not all of it, it should be certainly. There should be an element in there of that. Just see how I can lift off some of this.
Yeah.
It's a generational, but I don't know. I get lost for words when I think about it sometimes. I do. I really do.
But we're grateful for poems like Heart Ease that remind us that there is the physical location, heart ease, but there is that space within, that internal space that we can go into, that space of heart ease.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if I ever got, I hope one day that Hearties, you know, I would love to be able to make Hearties into a sort of great spiritual site. I don't know, maybe generations after might take it up. I don't know. It would be nice if that could be, if that physical place could be a manifestation of that internal Hearties. But as I said, I'm near the end of my work, so
no, but reminding us back, taking us back to Nelson Mandela of the word, the power of the word, sound power. So here we go. We're putting it out in the universe.
We're putting it out in the universe, and one day the site Hearties will really become that. It will become a place where people can go and find a measure of Hearties on earth.
Yeah.
That might be nice. I'm sure I probably won't see it, but when you see it, remember that Lorna, yay, Hearties.
And you will see it. And you mentioned being a painter, and I think, I'm not sure if it's all your book covers have your paintings on them or many of them, but right. I remember when I read that poem by Tightrope Walker, and I read that line, my iridescent kingfisher blue bathing suit, and I thought, you can describe colors this way? It was life-changing. And so just want to remind our students of the power of imagery in your work.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm not alone in this. There are several poets who have studied as painters. They've trained as painters. And Derek was a painter. W.B. Yeats was a painter. That's what he trained as a painter. His father was a painter, as was he. So, I'm reading, there are a number of poets who are, who train.
We have Jamaican poet Jacqueline Bishop, who paints as well and does quilts. Yeah.
So, the imagery comes I think people who are painters, you just paint the words. You just simply move over and paint the words. What would happen to me initially was that I would do a painting because at a particular time in my life, I was convinced that I was a painter who would do a little writing on the side. But I would do a painting. For example, I remember doing a painting of Sister Mary and the Devil, which unfortunately I've lost. Lost it in a hurricane. I lost a lot of my paintings that way. But it was this painting of Sister Mary and the Devil, and then what I found, I had not exhausted the idea. So then I wrote the poem, and it was happening like that initially. I would do a painting, and then I found the idea had still not been exhausted. So it would go off it would keep going in the form of a poem. And then one day it turned around. And now I just write, and I do hardly any painting. So I don't know. That's just my strange life.
But I love that because we can see the painting in the poem, the dust covering the white shoes, Sister Mary, and the man holding her waist, and we see all of that.
I can see the painting now. I did it when I lived in Gardentown, because I was living in Gardentown at the time, and on Sundays you would see people passing down going to church, and I just saw this lady, and then I saw this man come up behind her, and the two things came together, and there came the poem. So I painted it. And then I wrote it.
And I close by saying, now that you mentioned this, just reminding us of one of the powerful things in your work is how you deconstruct those boundaries, how you combine things and make space for both of them. The biblical hymns and what we call the, I guess, profane, the secular songs, and how these things combine in your work, the darkness and the light, and there is that tension, but there is the way in which they coexist and find a space of balance and harmony.
That's life, though, isn't it? I mean, there's no joy that is not tinged by sorrow, or vice versa. Hopefully, I've found that is just how life is. And when we're being sold a bill of goods by anybody who tells us that there's just pure untrammeled joy, and then there's pure, it's not true. Not in my experience. Even in the most, at your most ecstatic, sometimes, one of my favorite poets in the whole world is John Keats. I love John Keats because he's so wonderful at that. He will, in the middle of that, there's a, I love the ode to a nightingale. I love that poem so bad because it just he says something like he's telling you that it's not. My heart aches and a drowsy numbness pains my sense as though of hemlock I had drunk, or emptied some dull opiate to the drains, and 1 minute passed and let the words had sunk. And then he says, it's not true envy of thine happy lot, but being too happy in thine happiness. And he's saying, this is so weird. He's saying, it's not that he envies the birds, this wonderful song. It's just that he's so overly happy that it has made him unhappy.
And if we think about it, it makes perfect sense, because,
But being too happy in thine happiness.
Yes.
And it's true. Excess joy tumbles you over into sadness, or
yes.
on sadness. So we should tell people, young people, that's not abnormal. There's nothing wrong with you. It's because you feel so happy that sometimes you cry.
Yeah.
We should tell them that's all right. John Keats says, all right.
And then, we balance these things, all the time we're balancing these things.
Absolutely. And sometimes we don't, but sometimes that's all right too. Sometimes you just can't manage.
Right.
You just cannot manage, and that's all right too.
Yeah. Oh, this has been wonderful, Lorna Goodison.
Right back at you, Tanya, Shirley.
Could you read us a poem to close us out?
What, you have a particular poem you want me to read?
Anything you want to read.
Oh Lord, man. No,
maybe
please.
I shall light a candle of understanding in thine. Is that the correct title, if you don't mind?
Yes, it's from the book of Esdras in the Apocrypha.
And maybe before you read, we can just say that this is a good luck, blessing, and balm for our Cape literature students.
And yes, may I light a candle in any kind of darkness that is, seriously, in your life, really.
Yeah.
Okay, I shall light a candle of understanding in thine heart, which shall not be put out. I shall light. First, debts to pay and fences to mend. Lay to rest the wounded past, foes disguised as friends. I shall light a candle of understanding in thine heart. Cease the training of impossible hedges round this life, for as fast as you sow them, serendipitous thickets will appear and outgrow them. I shall light a candle of understanding in thine heart. All things in their place then in this many-chambered heart, for each thing a place and for him a place apart. I shall light a candle of understanding in thine heart, which shall not be put out. By the hand that lit the candle, by the never to be extinguished flame, by the candle wax which windward drips into candle wings luminous and rare, by the illumination of that candle, exit death and fear and doubt. Hear love and a possibility within a lit heart shining out.
Lorna Goodison, bless you and thank you. Thank you. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and good luck on your exams.
Good luck,
care.
Students. Good luck. Okay. Love. Bye.
For